Hey everyone. While the rest of the country is placing bets on these legal applications like DraftKings and FanDuel, in the shadows of North Jersey, a mob run gambling empire was quietly pulling in millions of dollars, all under the control of a guy named Lil Joe. Hey everybody, James Proctor here from Real Mob Stories, and today we're diving into a multi-million-dollar sports betting ring allegedly run by a bloodline of Lucchese wise guys right out of suburban New Jersey. You're going to hear about college wrestlers turned bookies, a mob soldier who used his sons and nephews to run the family business, and even how a mob wife and an ex-wife got tangled into the operation. We're talking about little Joe Perna, an alleged Lucchese acting capo with deep family roots, who allegedly ran a nationwide sports gambling ring using offshore websites, a network of young agents, and a classic mob-style structure. And here's the kicker. This all happened after New Jersey legalized sports betting. So, why would anyone risk jail time to run an underground operation in a state where gambling's already legal? Well, the answer is because the mob doesn't play by the rules, they make their own. So, yesterday, authorities in New Jersey announced charges against 14 people tied to what they describe as a Lucchese crime family backed gambling ring that spanned from suburban New Jersey college campuses all the way across state lines. At the center of this case is a familiar name in the world of mob watchers, Joseph Lil Joe Perna, allegedly acting as the financier and brain behind this sports betting network. Even though New Jersey has had legal sports betting since 2018, this ring operated completely off the books. Investigators say they used offshore gambling websites, cash payments, and a web of bookies, including former college athletes, to avoid scrutiny and offer services that traditional sports books couldn't. And we're talking over $2 million in bets placed in a 3-year period between 2022 and 2024. The Attorney General, Matthew Platkin, he didn't mince words at the press conference yesterday. He warned that despite the new technology and the modern feel, the core of this operation was classic organized crime, money, control, and the threat of violence. And he made it clear that this wasn't a harmless vice or some guys taking bets in the back of a bar. This was a criminal enterprise built to launder money, avoid taxes, and expand the Lucchese family's power base. And it also wasn't just about illegal bets. In this one twist, it just shows how far these guys were willing to go. Two men who's tied to the ring were caught shoplifting $22,000 worth of goods from Home Depot, allegedly as part of a scheme to launder profits from the betting business. The mob's always known how to move money around, and now apparently they're using drywall and power tools. So while the charges range from racketeering and money laundering to promoting gambling and conspiracy, this was just the latest chapter in a long-running saga of mob-run gambling in the Garden State. And once you look deeper into who was involved, it becomes clear this was a family affair in every sense of the word. Little Joe Perna, he's an alleged 55-year-old acting captain in the Lucchese crime family's New Jersey faction, is being called the financial engine behind the operation. And Little Joe has deep roots in the Lucchese family dating back to the days of Operation Heat in the 2000s when he and his father were indicted in one of New Jersey's biggest gambling busts. So he's no stranger to the game. And what you'll notice about the latest indictments is how they're all tied to several of the Pernas. And this is what I call a bloodline operation. And in this bloodline operation, we also have Joseph R. Perna. So I'm going to try to get all these names right because there's a lot of Joes and Johns and sons, grandsons, cousins, and they all have the same name. But if I get this wrong, please correct me. I'm trying to get all of this right. So anyway, we got Joseph R. Perna. That's little Joe's 25-year-old son, was allegedly the guy running the day-to-day operations. Kind of think of him as a CEO in this underground enterprise. He allegedly coordinated dozens of subagents, he recruited clients, and he brought in college athletes to serve as local campus bookies. And one of the most striking parts of this case is the use of young athletes, especially former wrestlers from Rutgers University, who acted as ground level agents. And these guys were managing networks of bettors across the country. Then they said that also Anthony R. Perna, 23 years old, was involved, and he's Little Joe's son as well. You have Frank Zito, 23 years old, and that's Little Joe's stepson, and he allegedly was helping to run the business. And then investigators say that his mom, Kim Zito, 53 years old, who's also Little Joe's wife, was accepting cash proceeds from this gambling operation. And then besides that, you had nephews and associates that were involved. So there were extended family members from the Perna family. So you had Dominic Perna and Michael Chetta. They're described as Little Joe's nephews. And so they've been charged as subagents and bookmakers. And besides them, you also had young men such as Tyler Snorbush and Spencer Speciale. And these were standout wrestlers who became high-level betting agents. And then you had Nicholas Ramo. He's another ex-Rutgers wrestler. And then in addition to these guys, you had guys like Joseph Janish, William Maduros, and Devin Schuster, who all allegedly operated local books for the Perna organization. And then just when you couldn't think it could get more dramatic, enter Rosanna Magno, who's Little Joe's ex-wife. She was pulled over by police in April 2025 and tried to hide gambling records in her car. It's just crazy to me to think that both the current wife and the ex-wife of Little Joe are caught up in this case. And according to the Attorney General Placken, he said this was truly a family affair. And he wasn't kidding. From sons and stepsons to nephews, athletes, and ex spouses, this ring looked more like a family reunion than a criminal enterprise. But don't let the blood ties fool you. This was a highly organized, profitable, and technical savvy operation. You had offshore websites, encrypted chat applications, and a network of bettors, all controlled right in New Jersey. Understand, you got to understand, gambling will never go away. And to me, my personal opinion, it's hypocritical that the government goes after bookmakers while the same government actually allows it. So, also, from what I can see, there wasn't any violence in this case. This was a money making scheme. You have prosecutors who love taking on mob cases because it's headline grabbing. If these weren't mob guys, this would just be a back page story. But you can now say that the Mafia got caught running a multi-million-dollar gambling operation. It becomes front page news. And when you think about it, is $2 million in bets all that much over a 3-year period? So this wasn't just a throwback. It was a reboot of classic mob gambling, but for the digital age. If you ever heard someone say gambling's in their blood, the Perna family would be Exhibit A. This family is new to the game. They've been running action in New Jersey for decades, and they've got their arrest records to prove it. And to me, this is kind of a gambling underworld dynasty. And you can go all the way back to the patriarch of the Pernas, Ralph V. Perna. He's the old line. Now he's in his, believe, late 70s or 80s, and he kind of gained power after all the wars that took place with the Lucchese family in the 90s. We're told they took over as a captain around 2007. And when the dust settled from the old Jersey wars, Ralph was the guy that was tapped to lead basically everything in New Jersey. And he also was running the ship during that Operation Heat, which was a massive gambling bust in the late 2000s. And despite kind of aging out of the street level game, he's still regarded as an elder statesman. And then you've got Little Joe and the brothers. So I hope I got this right. Ralph's son, Joseph M., Little Joe Perna, he's at the center of our current story. So he's the main character. He's the financier, he's the strategist, and all that. But then you also have John G. Perna. He's another of Ralph's sons, and And he's no stranger to the headlines either. He actually pled guilty to an assault in an old Real Housewives of New Jersey case. And that was a case where a wedding reception was used as payment. And we also have Big Joe Perna. And despite the name, Big Joe's not Little Joe's father, he's a cousin. Law enforcement said that Big Joe took over the day to day operations after Ralph kind of stepped back. And we know that Big Joe was named in a separate 2025 indictment as running larger gambling operations, the poker clubs, online books, and more. And so when you look at it, you kind of got three generations of Pernas. You got Ralph, who's kind of the elder, not really involved. And then the sons are more what I call like the mid-level bosses. And then now the grandsons of Ralph, they're kind of stepping in as bookmakers and digital age earners. And mob insiders even told journalist George Anastasia, gambling for the Pernas is like politics for the Kennedys. It's just in their blood. So the names may change, but the racket stays the same. And while today they're using smartphones, applications, and encrypted messages instead of envelopes and payphones, the structure and the goals are pure Cosa Nostra. You keep the money flowing, you keep the loyalty tight, and you keep the heat off the bosses. Now, as wild as the Little Joe operation was, it didn't exist in a vacuum. This was just one branch of a much larger Lucchese tree, and it's deeply connected to an even bigger takedown that just happened just months earlier. Back in April 2025, New Jersey prosecutors charged 39 people tied to a sweeping Lucchese enterprise that covered everything from underground poker clubs and offshore betting sites to loan sharking and retail theft. And at the top of that food chain was Georgie Neck Zappola. And he's 65 years old. He's what I call a Lucchese OG. And, he was reportedly one of the three men on the family's ruling panel. He did time in prison, did 22 years in prison back in the 90s. And then after he got out of prison, he started overseeing New Jersey operations from the top. And they said that investigators said that Zappola was getting tribute payments from the Jersey gambling crews, more of this old school kick it up the ladder setup. So what does this mean for Little Joe? According to prosecutors, Little Joe was a mid-level manager in that wider April operation. His home was raided. They got his phone. And what they found was a bunch of encrypted chats and betting records. And so they said that helped to build this November case that we're talking about today. So I'm going to talk just a minute about the national sports betting scandals, which kind of proves the mob's still lurking around. So we've had two blockbuster indictments the last few days. We got the NBA gambling scandal, involving Chauncey Billups, Terry Rozier, Damon Jones. They were indicted for insider betting and linked to mob-connected poker games and these rigged gambling machines. And then now you also have a Major League Baseball bribery scandal. And that involves Emmanuel Clacy and Luis Ortiz. And they're both pitchers for the Cleveland Guardians. And they've been accused of taking bribes to throw specific pitches. And these were more prop bets. And so they're saying that this scheme allegedly earned $60,000 off of a single pitch. And while the Major League Baseball case doesn't name specific mob figures, the NBA case does, including guys tied to the Genovese and Colombo families, plus possibly even the Philly mob through South Jersey intermediaries. And what's the common thread of all of these gambling cases? What it tells me is that the mob is adapting. Instead of point shaving, they're targeting micro bets, insider information, and offshore platforms. So think of it as modern crimes with classic Cosa Nostra structure. In short, the Little Joe Perna case to me is just you got a few guys making a few bucks off of sports gambling. Um, you have the April bust, you got the NBA poker game scams and the Major League Baseball betting prop schemes. And it does show that organized crime isn't going away. It just puts on a New Jersey. And let's talk about what these guys are facing as far as time goes. My opinion is that most of the guys are going to plead out the cases. They're really not that serious, in my opinion, but they are serious as far as the time that they could get. And I'm really worried about Little Joe in particular. Little Joe is facing serious time, and I'm afraid if he's found guilty, he would be facing 10 to 20 years in prison. I just have to think he's going to do some sort of plea bargain and maybe knock it down, I don't know, to 3 to 5 years. The problem is that Little Joe's kind of gotten caught up in multiple cases, and the prosecutors are going to use that against him. They're going to do all they can to make him spend as much time as he can in prison. I just don't see him being able to get out of this without some time behind bars. I think some of the guys, other guys like the athletes who don't have a record, I could see them getting probation. And then the other people involved, I see them facing less than maybe 2 or 3 years. I mean, some of them could face up to 5 years, but I think for the most part, most of the people involved aren't going to get much time. I have to think that Joe's wife and ex-wife will get probation. Um, I think they're just mostly interested in Little Joe, but anybody with the Perna name, in my opinion, they're going to face at least a little time, I'm afraid. The thing that does help them out is there was no violence tied to the case. In my opinion, it shouldn't be that big of a deal for the gambling, but like I said before, this is a mob case, and prosecutors make it a bigger deal than it really is when they try to get their name out there on what they call a high profile case. But as more information gets released, I'll give you more updates. And I just want to conclude with just a couple of thoughts. The Little Joe Perna bus isn't just a juicy headline or another mob rap sheet to toss on the pile. It's really a snapshot of how modern organized crime operates. And what it tells me is the mob's not gone, the mob's not dead. It's just gone digital. But gambling is still the lifeblood of the mob, is what it's telling me. Even with sports betting legalized in much of the US, illegal gambling still thrives because of a lot of reasons. It's more flexible. You can get credit for betting. These underground books let bettors bet without upfront cash, unlike FanDuel and those other applications or DraftKings. Also, a lot of these people that are involved in gambling, they want to avoid paying taxes. The mob books don't report to the IRS. And, the thought is as well that the mob can fix outcomes. We know the mob can pressure bettors or they can settle debts with muscle, things DraftKings can't do. So you're able as a mobster, in many ways, be able to recover money that you couldn't. And also the people that bet, they sometimes think that, the mob is able to fix part of the outcome. But, it's not, you don't really see a lot of events that are being fixed by the mob anymore. You might have the prop bets scandal, like with Major League Baseball and something minor like that, but I don't think you're going to hear like the point shaving schemes and those type of things like you had in the 80s and 90s. So, in essence, legal betting doesn't eliminate the mob's market. It gives them a shadow to hide in. And so they're not competing with FanDuel or anything like that. They're offering a service that the sports books can't do. And the reality is some people would rather just deal with their local bookie than to go online and put their information online. What the case tells me is that the mafia isn't dead. They're alive and they're evolving. They've just learned to take advantage of technology to make a buck. Understand that it's still mafia to the core, and it's built to last. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe to Real Mob Stories with James Proctor. Thanks for watching. Until next time, take care, stay safe, and God bless you always.